Hey, Magnus here, and today we're going to talk about 5 things about the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K that I think you should pay attention to, or at least notice. Here it is.
Behind you with like the clouds, the sky and everything, and still be able to see.
We've got the Rode Video Mic. Here we go. M50. What do you guys think? M50. What do you guys think? I always mention that at the end of the videos, but I never actually show off the M50. Here it is. I got it. It's a fun little camera. You should definitely check it out. But that's not what this video is about. This video is about 5 things that I noticed about the bmpcc 4K. Gosh, that's a long name. Now stick around to the end of this video because after I talk about the 5 features, I also want to go over some comments about my recent uploads and respond to you live, because I figured why not do that as well too. Add a little bit of a reason and keep you sticking around to the end, especially if you watch my videos. And if you want, comment down below on what you guys think here, and I might feature it on my next video, if that is something that you guys like. So anyway, 5 things. First, now I use a Metabones EF to micro 4/3 speed booster on the bmpcc 4K. So that allows me to get an extra stop of light. It also gives me the ability to use my Canon EF lenses on the system. That system basically was designed for like Panasonic or Olympus micro 4/3 lenses, and it'll work natively with those. However, the one lens that I have, and I showed you guys before, I completely destroyed. Gosh, this is my only micro 4/3 lens and I completely destroyed it. So using my EF lenses would be great. It would allow me to gather additional stop of light and really get that good bokeh that I'm looking for in some shots, and it looks a lot more cinematic, reducing the crop factor from 1.9 to about 1.2, which is amazing on the camera. However, one of the downsides that I didn't realize until I started using it is the single AF autofocus doesn't work with Metabone Speed Booster. And if it does, and you guys can point me on exactly how to do that, please let me know in the comments down below, because I've been looking and I haven't found the easy way to actually get the single point AF to work. Now, it's not that big of a deal when it comes to this type of setup where I'm actually using the bmpcc 4K to film me right here in a nice controlled studio setup, which is perfect. You know, I don't have to move a lot, and if I'm out of focus like this, it doesn't matter because I know where I need to stand to be in focus, which is good. But it would defeat the purpose if I'm completely out of focus right now, which would be like, guy. But I would at least shoot this video all over again because that would be kind of silly. Anyway, trying to stay in on topic here. So yeah, it doesn't work, which is a bit of a nuisance, but it's not that big of a deal because with this cinema camera, I'm manual focus all the way. Moving on to point number 2, and this is pretty interesting and I haven't seen many people feature. So this feature is the fact that when it comes to photographers, shooting RAW is highly important. Now, the bmpcc 4K is a cinema camera first, and it allows you to hit a button to take a picture, and it's going to be an 8 megapixel picture. And you're not going to get anything more than 8 megapixels because that's what the sensor was designed to be. However, the fact that you can pretty much get raw video, but actually use them as raw photos at 30 to 60 frames per second means that you've got a burst rate that no digital camera can even compare with. 60 frames per second raw? That's damn near impossible. Now, granted, 8 megapixel files, that's what you're gonna have to work with, so it's not a lot of detail, but the images that you can get will look incredible, and they're raw photos. And if you shoot raw photos, you know the ability that shooting in RAW gives you. Just ask Jared Poland.
FronosPhoto.com.
That in itself can be a savior, especially if you're like shooting a wedding and stuff and you need some additional pictures and you need the ability to play with them and adjust them. You could do that in post with this camera and have unlimited amount of resources and pictures, so you can get that exact moment that came out perfect and use it, especially if you're doing like a DVD or a Blu-ray for a client and you need to get that right frame so that you can design a cover or something for them. But that's up to you, and that's what this camera gives you the ability to do. In fact, the thumbnail that I'm going to use was actually recorded off of a still frame off of this camera, and it was a RAW file, not a JPEG. Now, in comparison, for those that say, who would want an 8 megapixel file? Well, the Canon 5D Mark IV was heavily advertised to allow you to pull those 8 megapixel files right straight from the camera. So you would record a 4K video, and then the camera allowed you to kind of pick a still frame and then pull that as a JPEG. So, and that was a great feature that everyone loved. Whoa, you could pull a JPEG and 8 megapixels is awesome. Well, the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, gosh, that's such a long name. It allows you to pull a frame off of your video, but instead of JPEG, it's going to be RAW. And less of a crop than the 5D Mark IV, so win-win on that scenario, right? Now, this is something personally for me, and this has been advertised and talked about, but I cannot stress how amazing it is to be able to record straight to a hard drive from this camera. Now, I record video off of the Panasonic GH5, Samsung NX1, 5D Mark IV, just to name a few, and even when it comes to just transferring, not even transcoding the files, it takes a long time. It takes a long time, longer than I want, when I just want to get to production right away. And to have the ability to record RAW and then edit straight from the hard drive is just such a time saver. It's just that convenience. I can't stress enough on how good that is. Plus the fact that recording to a hard drive instead of buying expensive CFast cards, it just wouldn't make sense for you to record internally to a CFast or a UHS-2 SD card. So that is one thing that I wanted to emphasize. Now, speaking of, I already mentioned the Micro Four Thirds sensor mount and the fact that I'm using a speed booster, but the crop factor in itself, reducing from 1.9 to about 1.2, is an advantage that you get when you compare it to recording on any Micro Four Thirds camera, including APS-C, because APS-C is a 1.5 times crop, while on this camera it's a 1.2 times crop. So you get a really interesting, in fact better than Super 35, shallow depth of field ability with the lenses that you have. Now, it's not full frame, but it's darn near close to full frame, and you're gonna get some amazing shots. And the fact that you could do that in RAW for this price tag. Now, granted, a speed booster is going to cost you more. Now, the Micro Four Thirds speed booster from Metabones is close to $650. But I have heard, not yet tested, I have heard that you can get some other speed boosters that are less expensive. And because you don't really have a lot of the controls anyway, even on the Metabones for like autofocus, doesn't even matter, right? What matters is, in my opinion, would be the fact that to change your aperture. If you could change your aperture off of those cheaper speed boosters, which I don't have any, and I probably should pick up one and test in a future video, it's still a good thing to have. And to me, I was happy when Blackmagic announced that they were using the Micro Four Thirds mount if they weren't going to use a full frame. If it would have been full frame and would have been an EF mount, that's the best case scenario. But if you can't have that, at least it's got the Micro Four Thirds sensor size, and then you could just adapt your full frame lenses. So moving on. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, now where did I put it? Hang on. Oof, this bad boy. Now, it's kind of a nuisance that there's no in-body stabilization on the camera. However, I did a recent shoot on this camera on the bmpcc 4K, and I was using this bad boy to stabilize a lot of the shots, especially with the wide angle lens that I had. And it was kind of a little bit of a struggle, but that's fine. But then when I tried to use this 35 millimeter prime lens, it wouldn't stabilize correctly. So I'm like, screw it, I'll just shoot handheld. And the handheld footage came out great. Why? Let me show you. Now, there's no autofocus on this thing, so I'm gonna manual focus right here. So what you have is stabilizer. I kept that bad boy on the whole time. And basically having that was a lifesaver because it actually stabilized the footage really well. And I was surprised the fact that I was able to move around and it just looked so nice and non-shaky. So if you don't have the ability to access a gimbal, but you're picking up a lens because you need one, get one with stabilization on the lens because that does a heck of a job to stabilize the footage. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be like the footage of a gimbal, but it's going to be way better than not having any stabilization at all. The lens that I have right now is a very expensive 24 to 70 millimeter f2.8 lens. That's very expensive from Canon, and it has no image stabilization on that lens, so I would never use that lens without the gimbal if I'm walking around. But with this lens, I don't even need to carry a gimbal. I'm pretty happy with what I can get off of this lens. So awesome, definitely recommend. So those are the 5 things that I thought were interesting about the bmpcc. That name, bmpcc 4K. I thought those were interesting, but what do you guys think when it comes to any quirks or any special features that you found or liked or found interesting on the camera? Now, before I end this, I'm going to... Oh gosh, I forgot how much I tore up this lens. I should just throw it out, but I keep it as like a relic, you know, this 4K. What I've got here is a couple of comments that you guys have written to me in recent videos. I'm going to go through the specific Blackmagic video that I had previously on where I was doing a live review, and then a couple other ones if I find them. So, GPU Abuse says, "Are you crazy? Filming with a bmpcc with no external on an actual shoot?" No external on an actual shoot. I told him I'm totally crazy, but I didn't know what he was talking about, so I thought he meant no external power on an actual shoot. And yeah, the fact that I had so many batteries on me made it, I wasn't worried, and I had complete control over the scenario. If it was a live event or some other type of event where that would be a nuisance, then I probably would have had external power. But for this, I had the whole day to shoot. I can take all the time I needed, so worked. VPR comments, 1 minute 18 seconds equals 16 gigabytes? And it was not DCI RAW? Yeah. RAW at UHD format or even ProRes is a heck of a large file. Now, a lot of people complain about the 5D Mark IV and their MJPEG codec, but if you're not familiar with the fact that video is huge on a cinema camera, well then, if you plan on buying this camera, get used to it, because that's all you're going to get. Paul Wilson says, "Hi, have you come up with a solution to the short battery life issue? Do you have a suggestion as to using an external source? Thanks." Now, Paul, I do not have any experience using an external source with this particular camera that would be well. I know there are other videos that talk about it online, but I have not, and I wouldn't recommend any personally unless I tested them myself. So you could either follow other YouTubers, or in the near future, I'm going to pick up an external source for this and then see how it works for me. Now, this one was a particular issue that I mentioned in my previous video. Falcon Awesomeness says, "The Pocket 4K can't record uncompressed or lossless RAW at 60 frames per second. Never has been able to. Mainly because there isn't any media available yet to handle the data rate at lossless 60 frames per second. Vlogging? You're saying the same thing as other videos and channels, just way later. But to be honest, I would use it to vlog. Why not? People are using Reds to vlog on YouTube, LOL." Getting back to that comment, I was able to shoot 60 frames per second UHD RAW, uncompressed, on my Samsung T5 SSD. That worked out in the first video that I had, but then when I tried using it over and over again later, it would actually drop frames. Now, I think that might be because I've been using the hard drive a lot more, and I had a ton of footage already on there, and I didn't reformat the drive before I started using it again. So, but that in itself is no excuse. If I can't rely on it 100% of the time, I'm going to say it doesn't work. So I would agree that right now, at least as far as I know, there's no media that actually can record 60 frames per second uncompressed RAW on the bmpcc 4K. Now, when it comes to vlogging on this camera, I think it's totally doable. If you really want to vlog on this camera, you can get away with it. Get a wide angle lens. You can have a monitor, but you probably don't need it. I mean, just as long as you know where you are on the frame and know how to center yourself. Like, I have this method because I've vlogged a lot with the 5D Mark IV. I know where to look in a lens and how it's positioned so that I'm always centered. But then I can't be interesting when I want to like point something off on the side and know where it is on the frame. You can't get that type of creativity when you're using this type of setup. You really got to center yourself all the time, or at least know where you are at. But the power consumption, the fact that it's got no stabilization, minus, using a good lens, which a good lens would help a lot. No stabilization, the huge file sizes, it would be difficult, but not impossible. And if you're willing to spend the money on the accessories and everything that you would need to make it somewhat practical, then go right ahead. Everybody's got their reason, but if you want to vlog cheap, I will once again show you this. Now, I showed you this in the beginning of the video. This is the Canon M50. What do you guys think? This camera has a flip screen, could record 4K at 24 frames per second, 1080p at 60 frames per second. You can see yourself. It's got a mic jack, and the crop factor is still pretty intense at 1.6 times. As opposed to the bmpcc 4K, which with the metabones you can reduce it to 1.2 times, but then that adds to the cost, because if not, you're going to have a larger crop factor on this camera, and you could pretty much hold it like this and record with no issue, and it's a lot cheaper, and then you could use your money for other accessories. So if you're starting off, start off practical. If you're more advanced and you really want this camera, or you want it for film reasons, then yeah, definitely get the bmpcc 4K. But to each his own. And you'd actually save money if you were doing both film and this, and not have to own so many different cameras for different reasons. bmpcc 4K is fine. Anyway, that's all I got to say for this video. Like, share, and as always, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys next time. Take care.